The palace of the Sarathi Empire never truly slept. Even during its quiet hours, soft light flowed through the crystal walls, and the low hum of energy fields filled the air like a calm breath. The queen's residence sat at the very center, protected by layers of shields, codes, and elite guards trained from birth to defend her with their lives. Elias Ward stood at his post outside the queen's inner chamber, his boots planted firmly on the polished floor. He was the only human in this part of the palace, and everyone knew it. The Sarathi guards did not hide their doubt. To them, humans were short-lived, emotionally driven, and physically fragile compared to their own kind. Elias had heard the whispers more than once. "He is a symbol, not a shield," one guard had said. Elias did not argue. He had learned long ago that respect was earned through action, not words. His armor was simpler than the Sarathi suits, built more for flexibility than elegance. His rifle rested easily in his hands, familiar and comforting. He had been guarding doors since his first year in the military. A door was a promise. As long as he stood, nothing dangerous passed through. Inside the chamber beyond the sealed door, Queen Aralis of the Sarathi Empire worked late into the cycle. She trusted the palace systems. They had never failed her before. That was why she did not feel fear when the silence came. It started subtly. The hum in the walls faded, just a little. Most would not have noticed. The Sarathi guards, trained to trust their automated alerts, remained still. Elias noticed. His helmet display flickered for half a second. His comm channel filled with static, then cleared again. He frowned slightly and shifted his stance. Moments later, a Sarathi guard down the hall swayed and collapsed. Another followed, then another. No alarm sounded. Elias's heart began to pound. He activated his private comm line. "Security, this is Ward. I'm seeing guards go down." "Confirm status." No reply. The palace lights dimmed further, shadows stretching across the long corridor. Elias stepped forward, eyes scanning every angle. He knelt beside the nearest fallen guard and checked the armor readings. The Sarathi warrior was alive, but unconscious. Nervous system overload. "A pulse weapon," Elias whispered. Pulse attacks were designed to disable, not destroy. Clean, silent. Perfect for a quiet takeover. The kind used in assassinations. Elias straightened and moved back to his post, placing himself directly in front of the queen's door. His comm unit crackled again. This time, it stayed open. He was still connected. Everyone else was blind. Elias opened a direct channel to the queen's chamber. "Your Majesty, this is Guard Ward. Please remain calm and stay where you are." There was a pause. Then the queen's smooth, controlled voice answered. "Why do I sense disruption? Human?" "Because the palace has been attacked," Elias said honestly. "And I believe I'm the only guard still active." Silence followed, heavier than before. "That is not possible," Queen Aralis replied. "The Sarathi guard are down," Elias said. "Alive, but disabled. I don't know how long I can hold this position." "You should retreat," the queen said immediately. "Your life is not required for mine." "Well," Elias almost smiled. "With respect, ma'am, that's not how humans see guard duty." Before she could answer, Elias cut the channel and sealed the inner door manually. The Sarathi preferred remote control systems. Humans preferred things that could still work when power failed. Footsteps echoed faintly at the far end of the corridor. Not Sarathi footsteps. Elias took a slow breath and lowered his stance. He dragged two fallen guards closer and positioned their armored forms to create cover. He activated their shield emitters on low power, creating the illusion of active defenders. The attackers appeared moments later. They moved carefully, their forms sleek and dark, armor absorbing what little light remained. They paused when they saw the shields flickering near the queen's chamber. "This sector should be clear," one of them said in a harsh, unfamiliar language. Elias did not understand the words, but he understood hesitation. He fired. The first shot was precise, striking a joint in the lead attacker's armor. The enemy fell with a sharp cry. Not dead, but injured. The others scattered instantly, returning fire. Energy bolts struck the walls, leaving glowing scars. Elias rolled behind cover, his movements fast but controlled. He had trained for worse than this. Humans always trained for worst-case scenarios. It was one of the reasons other species feared them. Elias fired again, forcing the attackers back. He did not chase them. His job was not to win. It was to hold. Minutes passed, then more. The silence outside the palace pressed in, thick and unnatural. Elias's armor took several hits, warning lights flashing across his display. His shoulder burned, but he ignored it. Inside the chamber, Queen Aerolus watched through internal sensors. She saw the human move, fight, retreat, and advance again. She saw him bleed, and she saw something she had never seen before. No hesitation. Every Sarathi guard was trained to follow command structures. When those failed, confusion followed. Elias had no commands. No backup, no certainty of survival. He fought anyway. The attackers tried new approaches. They attempted to cut power completely. Elias rerouted it manually. They tried to breach from above. He collapsed the ceiling corridor. They tried to wait him out. Elias sat against the door, rifle steady, eyes open. Time lost meaning. At some point, the queen opened a private channel again. "Human," she said quietly. "Why do you remain?" Elias answered without looking back. "Because someone needs to." "That answer is insufficient," she said. Elias chuckled softly. Humans are built on insufficient answers. A heavy impact shook the corridor. The enemy was preparing a final push. Elias stood, ignoring the pain in his legs, and checked his remaining ammunition. Not much. Enough, maybe. He placed himself squarely in front of the door, blocking it with his body. When the attackers charged, they found something they had not expected. Resistance that refused to break. Elias fired, moved, struck, and fell back again. One attacker reached him and knocked him to the floor. His rifle slid away. Elias grabbed a fallen Sarathi blade and drove it upward, forcing the enemy back. He rose unsteadily, blood dripping from his armor. Still standing, still guarding. At last, distant alarms began to sound. Weak at first, then stronger. Reinforcements. The attackers hesitated, then withdrew into the shadows, leaving behind a broken corridor and a single human leaning against a sealed door. Elias slid down slowly, his strength finally giving way. Inside, Queen Aerolus stood in silence. The palace had fallen quiet, but the queen still lived, and outside her door, a human guard remained at his post, even as darkness closed in around him. The alarms that finally echoed through the palace were weak and broken. Like a wounded animal trying to cry out, they did not mean safety yet. They only meant that something, somewhere, had started to wake up. Elias Ward did not hear them clearly. He was half-slumped against the sealed door of the queen's chamber, his helmet cracked, his vision blurred. Pain pulsed through his shoulder and side, slow and heavy. He forced himself to stay upright. As long as he was conscious, he could still stand. As long as he could stand, the door was guarded. Inside the chamber, Queen Aerolus watched him through emergency sensors. The human's life signs were unstable, yet his position never changed. He remained between her and the corridor, even now. She opened the private channel again. "Human," she said, her voice steady but quieter than before. "Reinforcements are responding. You may step away from the door." Elias breathed out slowly. "When I see them," he said. "Not before." The queen did not argue. She was beginning to understand that humans did not respond to authority the way the Sarathi did. They responded to conviction. The corridor outside was ruined. Cracked walls glowed faintly where energy weapons had struck. Fallen guards still lay where they had dropped, their armor dim but intact. The attackers had retreated, but Elias did not trust silence anymore. Silence had become the enemy. He pushed himself upright and retrieved his rifle. The weapon's power cell was low, its barrel overheated. He adjusted his grip and scanned the corridor again. Movement flickered at the edge of his vision. Elias raised the rifle instantly. Nothing appeared. A trick, he told himself. Or fear finally catching up. He shifted position and activated a small drone from his belt, sending it down the corridor at floor level. Its camera feed flickered onto his cracked display. The attackers were still there. They were regrouping. Elias swore quietly. They had not fled the palace. They were waiting for him to weaken. Inside the chamber, Queen Aeralis noticed the tension change. "They remain," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "And they're smarter than I hoped." He closed the channel and focused. Humans had a saying: "If you cannot outgun your enemy, outthink them." Elias began moving fallen armor pieces, arranging them to look like active positions. He dragged debris into choke points and rerouted corridor lighting to flicker unevenly. He wanted the enemy nervous. The attackers advanced again, slowly this time. They scanned, paused, whispered among themselves. They had expected a single ceremonial guard. Instead, they faced resistance that adapted faster than they could. One of them fired a probing shot. Elias answered with 2 quick shots of his own, forcing them back behind cover. Minutes stretched into long, painful stretches of time. Elias's injuries worsened. His armor injected stabilizers, but they were limited. Blood loss was becoming a problem. He leaned against the wall briefly, closing his eyes for 1 second. 1 second too long. A sharp impact struck near his head, sending fragments of crystal across the corridor. Elias stumbled, barely catching himself before hitting the floor. He forced himself upright again, breathing hard. Inside, Queen Aeralis made a decision no Sarathi ruler had made in thousands of cycles. She armed herself. The queen moved to a hidden compartment within her chamber and removed an ancient weapon ceremonial. Yes, but still deadly. She did not intend to fight, but she refused to wait helplessly while someone else bled for her survival. She opened the channel again. "Human," she said firmly. "If you fall, I will not surrender." Elias laughed weakly. "Good," he said. Then they picked the wrong palace. The attackers launched a coordinated push. Energy bolts filled the corridor, slamming into walls and shields. Elias returned fire, moving constantly despite the pain. He slid across the floor, fired from a kneeling position, then rolled behind cover again. One attacker broke through the left side, faster than the others. Elias reacted without thinking. He charged. The move surprised both the enemy and the queen watching. Elias slammed into the attacker, using his body weight and momentum. They crashed into the wall together. Elias drove his elbow into a weak joint in the armor, then fired his sidearm point blank. The attacker fell. Elias staggered back, barely staying on his feet. His vision tunneled, darkness creeping in at the edges. He knew he was reaching his limit. The enemy knew it too. They prepared one final assault, gathering at the far end of the corridor. Their commander stepped forward, tall and confident. He activated an external speaker. "Human," the commander said in broken trade language. "Step aside. You are alone. This does not concern your species." Elias spat blood onto the floor. "Funny," he said. "Standing alone is kind of our thing." The commander raised his weapon. Before he could fire, the palace shook. Not from weapons, from power returning. Lights surged back to full strength. Shields reactivated with a deep, resonant hum. The fallen Sarathi guards began to stir. Armor systems rebooting one by one. The attackers froze. Elias smiled, relief washing over him even as his legs finally gave out. He dropped to one knee, still facing the enemy. Sarathi security forces poured into the corridor from both ends moments later. Weapons raised, voices sharp and controlled. The attackers were overwhelmed and disarmed quickly. Some fled. Some surrendered. The corridor was secure. Elias did not see most of it. He collapsed fully this time, his rifle clattering across the floor. Queen Aeralis burst from her chamber for the first time since the attack began. She crossed the distance quickly, ignoring the guards calling after her. She knelt beside the fallen human, her hands hovering uncertainly over his armor. "He lives," a medic confirmed, rushing forward. "Barely," the Queen exhaled, a sound she did not remember making before, as Elias was lifted onto a medical stretcher. He stirred slightly. His eyes opened just enough to focus on the tall, luminous figure above him. "Door, secure?" he murmured. Queen Aralis answered without hesitation. "Yes." Elias closed his eyes again, satisfied. Later, as the palace returned to controlled order, the Queen stood alone in the corridor where the fighting had happened. Repairs were already underway. Cracks sealed, scars erased, but she could still see it. A single human standing where entire formations had fallen. Sarathi doctrine taught that perfection came from design and discipline. What she had witnessed came from something else entirely. Choice, sacrifice, refusal to step aside. When the Queen returned to her chamber, she issued new orders, quiet ones at first. Humans would no longer be placed as symbols. They would be treated as what they had proven themselves to be, guards who stood when silence fell. And somewhere deep in the medical wing, a human slept, unaware that an empire had begun to change because he refused to leave a door unguarded. The medical wing of the Sarathi Palace was filled with soft white light and the low sound of healing machines. Elias Ward lay still on the recovery platform, his armor removed, his body wrapped in layered medical fabric. Tubes and scanners hovered around him, working quietly to repair what they could. For the first time since the attack, Elias was not standing guard. Queen Aralis watched him from the far side of the room. She had dismissed the attendants and guards. This moment did not belong to ceremony or rank. It belonged to understanding. The medical overseer stepped forward and bowed slightly. "He will live," the healer said. "Human bodies are difficult to stop." The Queen inclined her head. "How long until he wakes?" "That depends on his will," the healer answered honestly, "which appears to be strong." When the healer left, silence returned, but this time, it was peaceful. Across the palace, however, calm was only an illusion. News of the attack spread quickly through the Sarathi Empire. The palace defenses had failed. Elite guards had fallen without warning. And a single human had held the Queen's chamber long enough for systems to recover. Many refused to believe it. In the High Council chamber, voices clashed like blades. Tall, luminous figures stood in tight circles, their markings flaring with agitation. "This is impossible," one counselor declared. "A human cannot replace an entire guard unit." "But the records confirm it," another replied. "Sensor data, weapon logs, visual feeds." "A fluke," a third said sharply. "Luck and coincidence." Queen Aralis entered the chamber without announcement. Silence fell instantly. She moved to the center and faced her council. "It was not luck," she said calmly. "It was choice." The human chose to stand when others could not. Some counselors shifted uncomfortably. "Our doctrine has served us for thousands of cycles," one said. "We do not change it because of one incident." The Queen's gaze hardened slightly. "This one incident nearly ended our empire." No one spoke after that. While politics turned slowly, shadows moved quickly. Far beyond the palace, aboard a cloaked vessel drifting at the edge of Sarathi space, the attackers gathered. Their mission had failed, but they were not finished. Their commander stood before a glowing tactical display. "The human is the variable," he said. "Remove him, and the Queen falls easily next time." Another officer nodded. "Then we strike again." Quietly. Back in the palace, Elias began to wake. Pain greeted him first, then light. He groaned softly and opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, smooth, glowing, calm. Not a corridor. Not a door. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Do not," a voice said. Elias turned his head slightly and saw Queen Aralis standing beside him. He froze, then tried to push himself upright again. "Your Majesty." She raised a hand. "You are injured. Remain still." Elias relaxed back onto the platform, breathing carefully. "No," she said. "Because you did not allow it." That answer seemed to satisfy him. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Then I did my job. The Queen studied him closely. Why? Elias frowned. Why what? Why continue? She asked. When retreat was logical, when survival was unlikely. Elias thought for a moment. Because if I walked away, he said slowly, I'd have to live knowing I left someone undefended. That's worse than dying. The Queen was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. You do not serve because you are ordered. You serve because you decide to. Elias smiled faintly. Yeah, that sounds right. Days passed. Elias healed faster than expected. Human biology, combined with Sarathi medical technology, worked miracles. He was walking again within a week, though under strict orders not to return to duty. He ignored those orders. One evening, as palace corridors glowed with restored energy, Elias found himself standing once more near the Queen's chamber. Not guarding, just observing. It felt right to be close. A Sarathi guard approached him and stopped. Instead of mocking, the guard bowed. Elias blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that. The guard straightened. You stood. When silence fell, he said simply. We acknowledge that. Word spread. Humans stationed across the empire noticed a change. They were listened to more. Consulted. Trusted. But not everyone approved. One night, as Elias walked alone through a side corridor, the lights flickered. His hand went to his sidearm instantly. The air felt wrong. Hidden panels opened in the walls. Automated drones emerged. Weapons charging. Elias dove behind a pillar as energy fire tore through the space where he had stood moments before. He rolled, fired back, disabling one drone mid-air. This was not a random attack. This was targeted. Elias activated his comm. Security breach. Internal. I repeat, the signal cut out. He moved fast, staying low, using pillars and shadows. The drones adjusted, learning his movements. Smart machines. Too smart. Elias realized the truth with a chill. Someone inside the Empire wanted him removed. The Queen felt it the moment palace sensors went dark again, only for a heartbeat, but enough. She rose from her seat. Find the human, she ordered. In the corridor, Elias took a hit to the leg and stumbled. He forced himself onward, teeth clenched. He would not fall alone in the dark. Not again. The drones closed in. Then palace doors slammed shut around them. Sarathi guards flooded the corridor, weapons blazing. The drones were destroyed in seconds. Elias collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Queen Aerolus arrived moments later. This was meant for you, she said, not as a question. Elias nodded. Seems like it. The Queen's expression hardened. Then the threat is not over, and next time, they will not underestimate us. She looked at Elias, truly looked at him. You are no longer just a guard, she said. You are a symbol. Elias sighed. I was hoping to avoid that. Despite everything, the Queen allowed herself a small smile. Beyond the palace, enemies watched and planned. They had failed twice. They would not fail again. And as the stars turned, the Empire prepared for a truth it could no longer deny. When silence fell, humans did not retreat. They stood. The palace stood brighter than it ever had before. Repairs were complete. Shields were stronger. Patrols moved with new patterns, mixing Sarathi precision with human flexibility. The silence that once felt deadly had been replaced with alert calm. The Empire had learned its lesson, but enemies did not stop learning. Queen Aerolus stood before the High Council. Her posture calm, her voice steady. The attack on the human was not random, she said. It was a test. And now, the enemy prepares something larger, the council chamber murmured with uneasy energy. They fear humans, one counselor said slowly. No, the Queen corrected. They fear what humans choose to do when rules collapse. Across the palace, Elias Ward stood in a quiet armory, adjusting his gear. He had been cleared for duty again, though the Queen herself had insisted on one condition. He would not stand alone anymore. Sarathi guards moved with him now, not in front, not above but beside him. Elias did not ask for this change. He did not want medals or speeches. He only wanted to do what he had always done. Stand where he was needed. The warning came without ceremony. A deep tremor passed through the palace. Sensors screamed across every display. A massive, hostile fleet emerged from stealth at the edge of the system, far larger than the previous force. This was not an assassination. This was an invasion. Targets locked on the palace, a tactical officer reported. They are ignoring outer cities. They want the Queen, Elias said quietly. Queen Aerolus turned to him. And you? Elias exhaled slowly. Figures. The enemy fleet launched a focused strike, disabling orbital defenses with precise timing. Drop units began descending toward the palace grounds. The High Council panicked. We must evacuate, one cried. No, the Queen said firmly. We stand. She looked at Elias. Where do you want them? Elias blinked. Ma'am? Where do we make our stand? She asked. Elias studied the tactical map. He did not look at ranks or traditions. He looked at angles, paths, and human limits. The inner ring, he said. Narrow halls. Hard turns. Places where numbers don't matter as much. The Queen nodded. Do it. The battle began fast and brutal but controlled. Enemy forces breached the outer palace walls, only to be slowed by layered defenses and unexpected resistance. Humans and Sarathi fought together, covering each other's weaknesses. Where Sarathi shields failed, humans adapted. Where humans tired, Sarathi held firm. Elias moved through the chaos like he always had, focused, determined, human. He took command when command broke. He redirected units when plans failed. Not because he outranked anyone, but because people listened. The enemy pushed harder, desperate now. Their commander, watching from orbit, snarled. Send everything. Break the human. They did not understand. Breaking was not something humans accepted easily. The final assault reached the Queen's chamber, the same corridor where silence had once fallen. Elias stood there again. This time, he was not alone. Sarathi guards lined the corridor, weapons ready, eyes steady. They waited for Elias's signal, not because he ordered them but because they trusted him. The attackers surged forward. The corridor became light and sound in motion. Shields flared. Weapons fired. Walls shook. Elias took a hit and staggered, but stayed upright. A Sarathi guard caught him without hesitation, pulling him back into position. Still standing? The guard asked. Elias grinned through the pain. Always. The enemy commander finally entered the corridor, towering and armored, confident in superior strength. He stopped when he saw Elias. You, the commander said. You should have died. Elias raised his weapon slowly. Yeah, he said. I get that a lot. The commander gestured. You cannot win. Elias glanced behind him at the guards. The Queen's door. The empire he now understood he was protecting. I don't have to win, he said. I just have to hold. The fight that followed was short, fierce, and decisive. Sarathi tactics and human adaptability merged perfectly. The enemy commander fell. His forces broke. The fleet retreated under relentless counterfire from restored defenses. The invasion ended not with a roar, but with a retreat. When the dust settled, the palace still stood. The Queen still lived. And Elias Ward still guarded the door. Later, as stars shone calmly beyond the palace windows, Queen Aerolus addressed her empire. Today, she said, we learned something important. Strength is not found only in perfection or planning, it is found in choice. She turned toward Elias, standing quietly at the edge of the chamber. This human stood when silence fell, when fear rose, when retreat was logical. The Queen bowed, not as a ruler, but as one guardian to another. From that day forward, a new tradition spread across the stars. Humans were no longer assigned as symbols or observers. They were placed where failure was unacceptable. Because when systems failed, when silence came, when plans broke, humans did not wait. They remained, they stood, and the stars remembered.